What is up? What is up, world? Mike Lang here with the Homie Webs as usual, and this is Hoodlums of Everything, our show about us just discussing how we view the world, pop culture stuff, things that are popping up. How's everything going tonight, Webs?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
I had an opportunity to go and get some coffee with your moms, so that was cool. Moms was here. It was
Yeah.
always awesome. Um, and for those who don't know, like legit, Webbs and her mom are spitting images of one another. They're like twinsies. It's kind of freaky, actually. It's kind of disturbing to tell you the truth, just because, like I guess you, as someone who does not look like either of my parents in kind of a spitting image kind of sense, it's always interesting when you see like, oh, this obviously these people are related. Like that's very kind of interesting. So shout out to Mama Webbs. Hopefully she's back home in Michigan safely, so that's what's good. And
She
tonight,
is, yes. She headed home
excellent,
yesterday.
excellent. And tonight, what we're over. We're going to call this episode the Bond Question. And we're going to kind of take it from a kind of a tongue-in-cheek way. We're over the idea that intelligence gathering is a solo operation. Sir Ian Fleming, creator of 007, was actually an officer in the British Naval Intelligence Division, Room 39 of the Admiralty. And Fleming was no paper pusher. He wasn't this average Joe walking around those halls. He was the head of 30 AU, a commando unit that gathered intelligence and put that intelligence into action. His genius, understanding that raw intelligence without human interpretation is useless, but human intuition without intelligence support is flying blind. This concept is exemplified by Q in the 007 novels. Q isn't just a gadget guy. He's the quartermaster of the intelligence operations. Q represents the marriage of human expertise with technological capacity or capability. Q doesn't replace Bond's judgment, he amplifies it. Q provides the intelligence that makes Bond's judgment lethal. In our classrooms, every teacher resistant to AI is essentially saying, I don't need intelligent support. But imagine Fleming trying to plan Operation GoldenEye without code breakers, without reconnaissance, without data analysis. That's you trying to personalize learning for 150 students without co-intelligence tools. And this session tonight, this episode, is kind of inspired by Shania Bond. Those who are aware, Miss Bond is a teacher in Texas, and she kind of famously, is that the word? Famously.
She had 2 articles that came out on, I think it was Edutopia.
Edutopia, yeah. Well, she declared that her classroom is going to be an AI tool free zone, which I don't think that's possible, but it is what it is.
At the time of the articles, it might have been. I feel like anymore that is not the case.
So the first article was 2024, and the second article was earlier this year. And
really, why did I think this was like a couple years ago? Oh my gosh, that's wild.
2024 and 2025. So I think even in 2024, the idea that you were utilizing tools that were not enhanced with machine learning, probably a mistake. 2025, definitely so. Like that, this year has proven that everything from your like bread slicer has some kind of AI or machine learning component to it. So we're gonna gotta get into it before we get into the Bond thing. Of course, is like we're talking about James Bond, but really, as are you a movie buff in that particular sense, in that genre of film? Webbs, have you watched lots of the 007 films?
No, I vaguely remember. So as a kid, I was always fascinated by the idea of Q. Like I've always related to the guy in the chair kind of characters, okay, or like the tech whiz kind of characters, okay, probably not surprisingly. But I was never a big one. Like I think I saw one of the Pierce Brosnan ones. Like I knew of Sean Connery when I was a kid,
Mm.
and I've seen a couple of the um uh
Or
Daniel Craig ones.
okay, then,
Like
okay.
I saw the one where he like goes back, like the one about his childhood. Um
The
I
last
almost
film,
totally did spoilers, but maybe that movie's old enough it'd be fine.
the last film,
Maybe.
Die
Okay, I'm
Another
gonna
Day.
say a spoiler about this Bond movie. So if you are listening and you don't want to know the spoiler, now is the time to look away or plug your ears, and I'll just wave frantically when I'm done talking about it. Ready? Three, two, one. It's the one where the house blows up.
I mean, lots of things blows up a lot. So that was Skyfall, probably is what you're talking about.
Skyfall. Oh, yes, because the name of the house was Skyfall,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
Oh, okay.
that's
Here you
Skyfall.
go. You can come back now.
Uh,
It
yeah.
was
So
Skyfall was the movie we were thinking of.
I am someone who I believe I've seen every Bond film probably 17 times. Like, as a kid, my parents were always the Roger Moore films, the Timothy Dalton ones, the Sean Connery. Um, so we watched all the films, and, Doctor No, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, I think the before they got too gimmicky, and I think they got a little bit like cartoonish at a point where he was doing all kind of things that like a regular person could do. I think Daniel Craig took it back to the regular human, gritty. I'm not relying on tech tools kind of mode, and I think that's the we're talking Daniel Craig, uh, 007 at this particular point. This I think a lot of educators, unfortunately, think they have to go into uh, their practice in this kind of solo situation where if I can't figure it out on my own wits, I shouldn't be in the field, and things like that, and I'm gonna do my own thing. And to your point, Q, especially the updated Q, there is a point at which, as instructional designers, as individuals who lead in learning environments, in which you have to understand what resources you have to bear and how to use those resources, and that your own two hands can't do everything. Like there's satellites, there's safe houses, there are other agents that can help you. There's all these other things, and for you to go into the field like, hey, I'm just going to do it myself, and if I fail, it's just like whatever. I think that's interesting. I think that's really interesting. I do think that the Bond movies, why they romanticize this kind of lone wolf situation, he's never a lone wolf. He's always being supported by people constantly and being saved and being brought out the fire and given information. And so that's where our show is going to go this evening. Really, I'm not. I'm going to say this, and Webbs, you can agree, disagree, give me your perspective. I am not AI is going to save the human race, and certainly this is a great thing. I'm not one of those kind of people. I look at it in a similar way as the internet. It is a thing that exists that if you do not know how to use it, you will be used by it. So that's kind of my perspective. What do you think on that particular sentiment, Webb?
Yeah, I very similar, not surprisingly. And I kind of realized recently that anytime something elicits a highly emotional reaction from me, I want to question it. And that goes to, I think, in talking about AI, whether that's an extreme of like we should get rid of it altogether, or an extreme of like, oh my gosh, it's just like the most forward thinking, like most brilliant save the world tool. Like it's the reality is definitely probably in the middle and not nearly as amazing as you might think. Um, and so I'm always wary when something evokes that strong reaction, um, to really like step back and pause, as far as like, okay, let me do some investigation into like what is likely the reality of this situation. I think in the case with LLMs, it is important to understand, and I think as you understand how they work behind the scenes, they seem a lot less magical. I was
Mm-hmm.
actually just having a conversation with a friend about this a couple weeks ago, that we both kind of had this perspective of like, oh my gosh, AI is so dangerous. Like it's going to be the singularity and craziness. And both of us, when we started working with it and really pushing it to its extremes, realized that like it's not nearly as impressive. I mean, it's still impressive. It is impressive as a technological advancement, much like Google searching was. And also, I think that you can quickly find its limitations if you work with it enough. I don't know. Would you agree, disagree with that, or do you see that differently?
Well, I mean, it is a it is a tool, and as long as I look at it from the perspective that it is a tool, I don't. And this will take me back to my high school days. So I graduated from high school, not to date myself, in 1999. Best graduating class of all time. Period. Like there's no arguments. I will not take any arguments from that at all. However, I had an English teacher, and again, if you're of a certain age, you're in your what do we call them? Millennials, whatever we all genials, whatever the term is. We did not grow up as children with the internet. We were the individuals who were kind of adapted or adopted into the internet age in like early adulthood, high school, and I had an English teacher, and Miss Bond is an English teacher as well. I had an English teacher who told me when I was a junior in high school that the internet was a fad and would never catch on. Like, no, don't worry about it. It's not a thing. Like, you're still going to be going using encyclopedias and all that stuff like that. And she was very adamant about this thing. And so, um, had I listened to her, I would not have been prepared to do a lot of the things that I had to do in adulthood, because I would still be navigating the just the apparatus that is the internet. And so what I would say is being it is important to expose yourself to tools that could, whether they're going to be the future of the thing of the world or not. It is always great just to have some exposure to things to say, you know what, I've played enough with that, so I can actually make, to your point you were just making, I can make a judgment as to, okay, this is how this thing works. This is how I can integrate it into my current processes. This is the things that it might replace as I'm doing my work. These are the things that I'm going to definitely have to lean into as a human, because it's not going to be able to do these processes as fast as I am or as I could. And so I do agree with that, but I also think that it is important as instructional designers and educators that we do not wholesale ban things from classrooms that there's a high potential that those tools will be tools that impact the young people in our classrooms going forward in time. And when you start banning things, you start, whether that's books, whether that's pieces of technology, whether that's ideas or whatever, you start to get into a weird area where, as someone who already has a degree, already has a job, already has a way to provide for themselves, you are making a value judgment for people who do not have those abilities. And if you're wrong, then suddenly you have these individuals that you had the ability to influence now having this Achilles heel, having that they're hamstrung in a lot of ways, on which if you were to expose them to certain things, they perhaps might not be. So for those who are not familiar with Miss Bond's articles, we're going to kind of just talk about this. And for those who are not aware, the homie Webs here is a software developer. She has tons of experience like using these tools to build products. She also will hopefully be Dr. Webbs in a couple months with a degree in learning sciences. So we're not talking in kind of you know, we're not talking in some kind of a weird what are our thoughts in kind of a vacuum. We're actually conferring being able to converse about these topics in a highly educated and very specific way, rather than just saying, hey, AI is great, AI is not great, ban this, do this. We're going to really hopefully be having a conversation about this. And so what I used, if you're a teacher, and you're not familiar with the tool Collab is great. There is a free plan for educators. It gives you the ability to highlight across websites and the internet. Great tool, been using it for years. It's one of the tools when I want to go through a website and highlight things and then save those snippets. You'll notice here on the right hand side here that I have all my snippets highlighted. I can also locate those inside the document, and I can comment. So, excuse me, as you're working with young people, this is a way that you can collaborate in real time on the internet. Ms. Bond would probably be against this because it does use AI to do it. But again, think about being able to collaborate and collaboratively converse about a web article as a course, as a class. Use the teacher to be able to share your comments and things as well. Dynamite tool. Webs, anything?
This is actually, I have to share this with one of my professors because she uses something similar. She has just been using the Google Drive like commenting feature, but I feel like this might actually make it a bit smoother to do social annotations. So one of the things she would have us do is read through an article and do exactly what you're saying. And that's based on someone who has a degree in learning sciences.
No, it's just a great, if you read on the internet, as many of us do, this is a way to keep all your little ideas and snippets and things all the way around. Mood boarding is another way to do that, but we'll get into that later on. And so, Ms. Bond,
I did want to add one thing. I think it's important to set the stage in that she has some valid concerns here. Like, and our goal of discussing this is not to discount those concerns. It's more to discuss whether the solution of banning it altogether, one, is even possible. Two, if it matches the problem. So like the problem she calls out is that students are lacking in foundational skills. And if those justifications are like hold up under scrutiny. So this is more, think of this as a conversation that is meant to explore the topic, not to villainize anyone or anything like that. Yeah,
and if that's important. If this somehow gets to you, we would love to have a situation in which we converse with you in real time. It'd be wonderful.
Yeah, for sure.
So first of all, we have, we're just going to go through this article. This is written in August of 2024, so right before the last school year. If you're in where we are in Las Vegas, school year started about that next week. And the first thing that I want to discuss with you really quickly, Webbs, is this highlighted statement. Students who break the policy, that is not using or using AI during her class, will receive a 0 on assignments and there will be no exceptions, Bond said. Now, always gives me the cringes when people make absolute statements in this particular sense, just because no exemptions means that you're telling me there's nothing that will break this particular situation. But is it possible in 2025, again, as a technologist, as a PhD candidate in learning sciences, as someone who is, one of the individuals that when I have technological questions about how things work, you're the first person I tend to go to. Is it possible in 2025 to make a statement that says you cannot use AI for AI shouldn't be present in your classroom at all?
I mean, it would be very difficult. I didn't know that's the question you're going to ask, but it would be difficult because if you're using any sort of technology, there's a high likelihood at this point that AI is built in some way, shape, or form, whether that's Google Docs and Gemini being built in, even if it's even something simple like you open a browser now and you have an AI response that's built in and you can engage with it. You have not only search engines, I guess really search engines, not browsers, but browsers too. Like browsers have it built in, Google, Edge, like even just the computers themselves, you can on both, I think on all the major systems, Chromebook, Windows, and Mac, there is just an AI assistant built into the operating system. Web-based products have AI built in. So the idea that you can get away from it, and sometimes it engages without you even wanting to engage it. I've had a couple times where it's like, try to give me helpful suggestions, and all it takes is I hit tab or I hit space or I tap the wrong thing on the screen and all of a sudden it's like has a whole sentence for me. So I think it would be very challenging to say this is going to be a zero AI classroom in the first place. I wonder if I would be curious to know like if what she really meant by it was sort of intentional use.
Mm.
I would, because something about the sentence you highlighted, students who break policy will receive a zero. I would be curious what it means to break the policy, and how are you identifying students who broke policy? One of my kind of pet peeves and hills I will die on is AI detection tools. I don't know if teachers are aware of how inaccurate those are, because the claims by the manufacturers are, oh, we have a 99% detection rate.
Mm.
If even that 1% is wrong and you are kicking someone out of a class, you're giving them a zero, you're kicking them out of a program based on that, that's not a small enough percentage of false positives. And in investigations into it, have found that it's actually quite higher than that. So if it's a flip of a coin, whether or not you're detecting actual AI, that's not great. Some companies have started to put in like footprints or watermarks to try and tell like, hey, this was done with AI, but I mean those are easily like navigable around. I think also a thing I see a lot from teachers on social media is you can tell by how they wrote it, or if they're using M dashes. Ironically, because I do use Claude for things, and I see that it does put in M dashes. It got me curious about the use of the M dash, what it is, how it got its name, how do you do one on the keyboard? Like, is that even a thing that's accessible to humans? It is. What are the rules around using M dashes? Because I am a semicolon user and Oxford comma user. And so this attention on the M dash got me wondering about what other writings use M dashes. There are lots of historical authors that have used M dashes. So the idea that you're going to villainize the M dash and that's going to be your little, I started using M dashes more as a matter of fact, because I've done all this research into it. Like, I should just use it in my writing where appropriate, the same way I would with a semicolon or an Oxford comma. And so the idea that you can tell by how it's written that it is AI is also kind of frightening. Like, because now it's completely subjective based on vibes. Basically, you're saying I'm going to give this kid a zero based on vibes. So I would be curious how breaking the policy, what that looks like, because I don't know how you would go about, like, other than seeing a kid saying generate my assignment for me and I'm typing it in to Gemini or something. I don't know how you would actually enforce this.
What we're also, well, human bias, right? Personal bias. Hey, I don't like this kid. I can go and say that their writing was AI and dare you to prove that it wasn't. I mean, there's lots of potentially icky applications of this of that kind of concept. Which, as you were speaking, this was the thing which I didn't highlight initially. I'm not going to do that. But this article here, or this part of the article, AI can, this is a response to her initial tweet. AI can do a lot more than write for your students, brainstorm, outline, grammar, spelling, vocabulary, tone, feedback. Are you proposing none of these use cases be allowed in equal zero score? Yes, Bond replied. All of the things you mentioned are skills my students are supposed to develop in school. So that would be kind of the answer to your question. So if the kid used it to brainstorm, to outline any grammar, any spelling, any vocabulary, a tone check, or any feedback on their writing, they would receive a zero, which is wild.
That goes back to, though, like, I'd be curious how you enforce that policy. So how, like, other than finding right away, like, other than watching the kid type in, help me brainstorm this idea, how are you detecting that? Because, like, because this ends up punishing, if you're talking about AI detectors, assuming like, oh, I'm going to use the Turnitin AI detector, not that I'm not picking on Turnitin for any particular reason. Like if you were to do that, that's going to end up hurting the most vulnerable writers. Like there was a Stanford study that looked across 5 or 7 different detectors,
Mm-hmm.
and it found that like 61% of the time it flagged ESL students. Right? Those are not because their rating's going to be very formulaic most of the time. So like I don't know, it's just it's I feel like it reinforces, that is one of the downsides to AI. It reinforces a lot of our existing power structures
And biases, right? So also
mm-hmm.
where, this is one I've heard quite often. I know my students, I know their writing, and that doesn't sound like them. And you're like, okay, well, how do you know your students? Like you have some kind of repository of everything this person has written, and you've done this deep analysis of the 300 students you have in English class. Like, no, you're saying
And
that
also,
you're making some generalizations. Go ahead, what?
if I'm trying to improve my writing and then I get punished for improving it because I've been working on it, like even if even if that kid and that situation is more the exception, like how demoralizing for a kid who is trying to improve and actively working on improving to then be accused of cheating because I know what your writing sounds like.
Well,
I think we just need to accept the fact that that's not an acceptable method of being able to tell if a kid knows a thing or not, or if their writing is authentic or not.
the same English teacher that told me that the internet would not be a thing, she flagged me for plagiarism my junior year of high school. And so this is no AI, this is no this is just regular. I'm typing on a word processor, and we had to do a book report. And my favorite book of all time, for those who are unaware, is The Inferno, Dante Alighieri. My favorite story of all time. It's like I don't want to like make this like a negative thing, but like it's my catcher in the rye. When I see a copy of it in the wild, I buy it. Like especially if it's got beautiful illustrations and stuff. Anyway, do the report, turn it in, flags it. She wants a parent teacher conference, because there's no way, as an African American male who wears baseball caps and stuff, would I be able to understand the sonnets that are contained with the cantos contained inside of Dante's verse. No, I'm not. I'm incapable of doing those things. Parents had to come to the deal. They had to show her the ribbon. This is the ribbon that he wrote on. It was very embarrassing, but it also was a situation in which it reinforced to me as a later in life, as an adult educator, again, when you take personal biases into the learning environment and you start to say certain things are not possible because of what someone looks like or where someone comes from, you will find ways to go and say, yep, I was right, despite the fact that that person was capable of doing their own original work. And that is where, like, reading this article, these 2 articles that are here, kind of have hit me in my feels a lot, because it had brought me back to my childhood in terms of this person's questioning my ability to make sense of the world in a way that I know that I'm capable of. Which, as we continue, this next paragraph that I highlighted, I'm really interested in getting your opinion on. Or the next two paragraphs, because they kind of go together. Bond believes that allowing students to outsource their ideas and rough draft thinking to AI doesn't help them, and in fact devalues vital literacy skills like originality, creativity, analysis, and the synthesis. The original ideas are the most important component in a student's writing, Bond told me. You can polish everything else, but how are you going to polish an idea that you didn't originally have, that you didn't originally think of, and that you don't really have any investment in? I'm very interested in getting your thoughts on, in the age of AI, what define originality? Is originality possible?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, I think I somewhat agree with the spirit of what I think is being asked. So, like, yeah, if you go and say, write me an essay about Charlotte's Web, cool. I would then dig a little deeper and go, if the assignment is just give me an essay of Charlotte's Web, is that what is original about that? There's nothing original involved in that assignment either. So like what's really being asked? I would also wonder, and I don't know anything about Miss Bond's classroom, but I would also wonder, also I don't know if she goes by Miss or Mrs. or some other, that's another thing I don't. Anyway, another thing I oh shoot, I lost my train of thought. Going back to what is the assignment? Does the assignment ask for creativity, originality, and analysis and synthesis? There's a whole series of YouTube videos called Everything is a Remix. So one would argue that there is no such thing as originality to a certain extent. Like that's one of those things, like where do you draw the line of what's original, you know? If you're asking for the same 5-paragraph essay you've asked for the last 20 years, how at some point you can only talk about Charlotte's Web so many different ways. So I kind of can see the point here where like there has to be it is helpful to have upfront intentional thought about what your expectations are. What do you expect to get out of this when you're working with it? What are you expecting? But I think that's also, if the assumption is dump, prompt in, get output out, copy pasta to whatever needs to be submitted, is that a great way of using LLMs and tools like this? No, of course not. It's absolutely not. That I would agree with. To say that there is no way to engage and use those tools in order to scaffolding, right? Like if I'm a kid who has a vision for what I want to write, but my skills aren't quite there yet and I need more models for it, a tool like a ChatGPT, a Claude, a Gemini is going to be able to help me produce more of those and model from that much more quickly than an individual teacher trying to serve 100 kids can. So, and I don't know if too, like maybe I'm also thinking about this from the perspective of an elementary teacher. And I believe that she teaches secondary, right?
High school.
Yeah, high school.
English, yep.
So there might also be a slight difference there where I am used to scaffolding the initial use of tools, and maybe at secondary teachers aren't used to scaffolding the use.
We will get to that
of tools like that kind of.
We'll get to that because she has an example of how this was introduced, which I'm also very keen to get your ideas on. But I don't believe in originality. Original thought does not exist. Like you got your ideas from somewhere. Like you came into the world tabula rasa. Your environment, what you consumed, shaped your view of the world. You did not think of things in some kind of look, no one has thought this thought before, and now I will say this thing. Probably not, fam. I think the where I would disagree with her is, again, first, authenticity to me is the word, not originality. Is this concept authentic to who you are? Are you presenting something that's authentic to you? Great. That can be done with the use of any tool, the internet, the AI, whatever. Authentically being yourself is one thing. Now, if you're taking someone else's idea and presenting it as your own, that's inauthentic. Then I have an issue with it. But authentically, how's this person utilizing their voice? And I will bring this up, all right, because she's talking about original ideas, etc. In college, one of my lucrative side hustles was writing papers for people, right? People will come and be like, "Hey, look, I need a paper on X, Y, Z." Bet, I got you. It's $400. People will find the cash. They weren't trying to, whatever, right? So I was ChatGPT before ChatGPT. I know a lot of ChatGPTs that were writing papers for people like in college and stuff, right? I know people who are married to the person who was their ChatGPT in college who got them their whole degree. So this intention that for some reason before AI everyone was doing their own work that's laughable as well. I mean, again, not making, trying to make fun of it, but at some point, a lot of this becomes posturing, right? Um, I don't know if you're familiar with who Beanie Siegel is, the rapper.
Mm-mm.
DOC, the rapper. Nobody
Nope.
does it better. So there's two rappers who both have, at this particular point, they have lost their voices or have their voices compromised. And they are using AI now to be able to create songs. Now they're still writing the songs, they just can't save the songs anymore. So are they not original because the AI is essentially being cloned? They're absolutely original. They're authentic to themselves. They're writing the lyrics, and the AI is just being used as a vehicle to accomplish a task I can no longer physically accomplish myself. All right. It's no different than, again, I'm a big music fan. That's why I brought up the last example. But D'Angelo just passed. God rest his soul. D'Angelo, in his original album, his first album out, has his rendition of Smokey Robinson's "Cruising" on that album. Amazing song, smooth. It's a smooth song. Is D'Angelo not original? Is he inauthentic because he covered somebody else's song on an album?
Aretha Franklin. I did not realize Aretha Franklin's "Respect" was
It's
not the original.
it's not an original song, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
is she inauthentic because she covered somebody else's song? No, she covered it in a way that was authentic to her. You know that respect from her voice saying this is the way I see and interpret this particular thing, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when we start to think about, and this is not just an AI question, this is a learning environment question. If you start to think about the concept of originality in a space where teacher pay teacher makes billions of dollars every year because you're downloading crap from somebody else that you got some stuff back and you're using in your learning environment. People are taking curricula that they didn't write and utilizing their classroom. You're taking ideas from other teachers all the time. For you to start to say that authenticity, originality is important for your young people, but it's not really important for you because whatever reasons you decide to concoct, right? That is really interesting to me. That's super interesting to me. Again, I do not believe in originality. I don't think there's a person on this planet who is an original, who is some one of one person who is so unique that they don't do anything to anybody. If that was the case, we wouldn't have doctors because they would have to treat you in some kind of unique way that no one else's physiology matches yours. So therefore, we can't do the surgery the same way we did it on Bob down the street, right? It's another one of those like interesting things to look at. So, and I was going to skip this, but I'm not, because this is also, as an African American male and African American teacher, this also gives me the icks. And again,
This might have to be a two-part.
This is definitely going to be a two-part situation because
Yeah.
we're going to have to do the second hour. This is definitely going two parts. So for those who are not aware, the reason Webbs and I, the reason why we were a crew is we were both digital learning coaches. And I happened to be driving down I-15 one day, and this is this is a story I've not told very many people. So I'm driving down I-15, and I'm thinking I'm doing like this mental calculus of like, hey, I really want to do this thing. I wonder like who in my orbit would be like somebody to partner in this particular thing. So I'm like going through people or whatever. I'm like, oh, Webbs would be really cool. So I call her, and she's like, yeah, whatever, like cool, whatever. And I'm like, I don't have a name. All right. So I don't have a name for the concept. And I was transported back to my childhood, and Tragedy Khadafi has a song called Intelligent Hoodlum. And that song, I used to wear that. I recorded it off the radio and would wear that cassette tape out. I love the song of the message. The song was really him talking about, yo, I'm a highly intelligent person in an environment that does not view me as valuable. However, I am going to demonstrate my value. So the quote that we're from this interview that we're going to read, anytime someone speaks this spirit in public, it makes me angry because it is usually not true. Because I have worked in Title I, Tier 1 schools my entire career, Rebs, in the Deep South, all over Vegas. I know it's corny to say, but it's the kids. This is the reason why she loves her job, all right? When I first meet students, and then she calls out the individuals who are black and brown in this particular quote, and they say things like, I haven't read a book since fourth grade, or I don't like to write or read. I love creating these moments where they either connect with the text or... Okay. Webbs, you also taught in Title I, Tier 1 schools, did you not?
Mm-hmm.
Of the percentage of kids that you taught, which Las Vegas, you were on the east side as well, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's correct, yeah.
You're talking about EL students, you're talking about low socioeconomic students. What percentage of your students just didn't pick up books, didn't read, weren't reading for their own interests? Like, we're totally disinterested in the going to the library, the book fair, any of those things. Give me a rough percentage.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, I don't think if a kid found a book that was at their like appropriate level that they enjoyed, I would say probably less than 20%.
I would say that less than 5% of the students that I've taught in my career were individuals that were not interested in reading books.
Yeah. Now, granted, when it was forced on them, they did not like it. Right?
Well,
I think one slight tangent, I think one of the big problems that we have is forcing kids to read certain books, or like, I know the intention behind it was to get them to diversify what they're interested in, but sometimes we introduce that concept far too early when they haven't had a chance to bloom their love for reading, and we force on them like, no, that's not at your reading level, or that's not this, or like we don't let them just chase the joy, and I think that kills a lot of kids' desire to read. But for the most part, especially in elementary, and maybe this is part of the difference between experiences in elementary versus high school, but most of my kids, I think, regardless, enjoyed reading. Like, they loved the book fair. They loved the book fair. They enjoyed going, and maybe some of it might also depend on what librarian you have. Because,
well, I mean, to me, like, the thing that's like very burdensome to me, and I think you kind of said it. This is a secondary educator. I've taught middle school, so I've taught secondary school as well. But having a situation in which you are constantly asking a young person to compare and contrast what we're talking about to something they enjoy reading, right? Transformers, manga books, this, that. Suddenly, it's like you're validating their situation. Even like fairy tale. Last time I taught 7th grade English, it was all about fairy tales and cartoons and things like that were high interest things. But what I despise is going into a learning environment and making assumptions about the individuals that happen to be there because they happen to be from a certain neighborhood, they do certain things, et cetera, and not breathing life into them. Like, fam, you absolutely read books. Just because the book is 5 pages doesn't mean it's not a book. Like, you have to read novels for what reason? Like, if you want to read a novel, God bless you.
I would be very curious if the perception of kids don't like to read is also tied with the perception that audiobooks aren't really books, and comic books aren't really books, and manga isn't really books, and like this narrow vision of reading being novels.
Absolutely. And I think what the great thing I had about elementary school teachers in my experience when I was going through elementary school was like Miss Jackson, God bless her, would give us the little pocket classics. I still chase those. When I find those, I buy them. Little pocket classics were condensed versions of Moby Dick, of the Man in the Iron Mask, et cetera, et cetera. We were exposed to those things in 3rd grade, but she never forced us to read those books. But they were just lying around, illustrated, age appropriate in terms of vocabulary, and suddenly we had these ideas of, here's Victor Hugo. Great. I read Les Miserables when I was in fourth grade. I didn't read the unabridged version of the book, but I can converse about Les Miserables now as an adult because I read the version in fourth grade. And that was 95 pages as opposed to, I don't have any idea how long the actual Les Miserables is. So that being the case, there's a way for us as instructors, when we start thinking pedagogically, to allow young people to be literate. And I think we also have a situation, we talk about literacy, like literate means to know something, not to be able to read. So to know something in concrete, in a tangible way, not I read this in a book. I mean, cool. I watched a YouTube video with a creator who actually has the bona fides to speak about X, Y, and Z. I watched that video. Now I know about da 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 da. Go ahead. What's look to you?
There was an interesting conversation we had in one of my classes a couple years ago where we got on the topic of literacy, and my definition of literacy is quite broad. Like I think it's just understanding insert thing here, like body literacy or mathematical literacy or milieu other things. And so we had that conversation amongst the class, and I was surprised that I was the outlier. In most people thought of literacy as the ability to read, and when really and we had the conversation about literacy is more broad than that. In this particular case, we're talking about your ability to understand, read, hear, like process language. However, it like I made a pretty solid case for like applying the concept of literacy to things that are not words. And so that was just a really interesting conversation.
Well, I mean,
technology literacy is one that I use a lot as well.
If somebody does not speak English, does that mean they're illiterate in the United States?
By the government's definition, yes.
Which is ridiculous, right? So I might be a Rhodes Scholar, but I only speak Swahili. I come to the United States, I can't speak English. Does that make me an illiterate person? Absolutely not, right? Through our very xenophobic lenses in this country, if you don't speak English and you can't pass the S back in English, and suddenly you need to go to remedial courses. Well, that's kind of a problem. And I got to also, when you live and you spend time in other places that are not the United States, and you start to see how things function and work and how people are valued or not valued in those particular spaces as well, and you start to think about, there are a couple students that come to mind immediately in terms of this kid knew a lot about a lot. They just could not articulate that in English. And there was no test that would demonstrate, allow that young person to demonstrate, hey, I know what you're talking about in the math course. The only reason I can't do the math is because the word problem is only in English. If you just gave me this just in Spanish or in Tagalog or whatever, bro, I can knock this out. What you're doing is you're trying to make this a referendum on my ability to read English rather than a referendum on my ability to do work. And that's where it becomes like kind of seedy in my opinion, especially when you talk about, I'm a big poetry fan, as Ms. Bond seems to be. Again, I love haiku. Haiku are Japanese poems. So the originators of the art form were not English speakers, but this is an art form that English speakers have now taken, adapted, and molded in for our own uses. But if you attempt to read the original Japanese poems, or you ask the original Japanese writers to write a haiku, but they wrote in Japanese, is that person able to write a haiku by our current definitions of that art form?
Yeah, my bilingual program in undergrad, one of the things that they really impressed upon us was being able to separate the difference between being able to demonstrate proficiency in something and separating that from a student's ability to speak the language that it's provided in. So they always encouraged us, like, if you have a student who, in this case English, doesn't speak English, give them their assignment. And like, if your goal is for them to learn science, give them the content in Spanish, because the goal is to learn science, not to speak English. I mean, yes, it's great to expose them to it, but the goal is to continue to progress their knowledge of science or their knowledge of social studies or their knowledge of math. In that particular case, the more important thing is for them to continue to progress in that area and not to limit them based on their knowledge of English.
Which brings us back to, if you were teaching EL students but you were not using AI tools to help you, and you were not literate in the language of the young people, the second language learners in your classroom, but you said no AI, isn't it also problematic in that particular sense, in that we know the AI tool, especially if you look at the Google stuff that most schools are going to have, since Google is there. You've got Google being able to translate stuff into 126 different languages at this particular point. So if I was a young person from XYZ country that speaks XYZ language, but you told me first day of class, ain't no AI, but I do not understand what you're talking about, and I'm unable to progress, not because I'm not intelligent, it's because I don't understand what you're saying, and you say no AI, well, that would be kind of problematic as well, would it not? I mean, just speaking from I mean, I guess not just moral, but also the instructional design framework, right? Like, I now no longer feel comfortable and safe in your class because you just told me a tool that I know can help me do this a little bit better is going to be denied me. Just, the last couple of years going into upper elementary and middle school classrooms and just demonstrating to the teacher, take your phone out. When you have these kids who don't speak English, take your phone out. Instant translations, man. I can speak into the phone. This is what I want you to do. Listen. Okay, I got you. And the key goes to work. But to pretend that doesn't exist is that's wild, B. Wild. Yeah, as Webb's kind of mentioned, the actual instructional part, we're gonna have to do a double part of, and this is actually pretty exciting because we didn't even get through the first article, which is kind of dope. But we got a couple more minutes. I want to go through two things with you very, very quickly. This big paragraph here, I'm going to read the paragraph, and I just really want you to listen and then give me your thoughts on this particular process. All right. So this is the process by which she experimented with AI, and then which essentially cascaded into no AI in my classroom. In the fall of last year, which would be 2023, I wrote a paper with my dual credit American literature students utilizing AI. The process is about that is not given. I was reading all these articles about how AI is inevitable, so I wanted to give it a try in the classroom with my students. I had them take a poem, read it critically, and annotate it, and then I gave them the option of writing their own literary analysis thesis statements or feeding their notes to AI and asking it to write a thesis statement for them. Those that chose the AI option had to use those thesis statements to write their papers, and the papers they wrote were really, really bad. It was after that experience and spending the rest of the year reading these AI written short answer responses, papers, and presentations that students were turning in that I realized there was a problem. M-dash. So did AI write this? My students don't have the skills necessary to be able to write something they get from AI and make it into something worth reading. I also realized that they're not using AI to enhance their work. They are using AI instead of using the skills they're supposed to be practicing. So I decided we're not going to use it in the classroom. So this is the initial incident that led to no AI in the classroom. What are your thoughts?
This goes back to what I said at the top. Anytime I encounter an extreme something that gives me a feeling, I question it a little bit. Uh-huh. And so in this case, that's interesting. So it's interesting on a couple of levels. Like the one sentence, those that chose the AI option had to use those thesis statements to write their papers, and the papers they wrote were really, really bad. Also hilarious, the M-dash. To jump from, well, for one, they had to use those thesis statements. I'm curious about that. Like, why did they have to use those? Why was there not an interjection point to say, oh, this is not a great thesis statement, or an activity to pick apart that thesis statement and determine, like, is this actually solid or not? And then you go to write the paper. Like, it's interesting, and maybe that happened and it's just not listed here, but that would be one place to like interject without throwing the whole thing out the window. and spending the rest of the year reading these AI written short answer responses, papers, and presentations. So I'd be curious, like, is the idea that they were continuing to go back to it, or like at what point did you scaffold, here's how you use this tool? I would be curious about that.
Mm.
And then I realized there was a problem. My students didn't have the skills necessary to be able to take something they get from AI and make it into something worth reading. Yeah, that makes sense. It's a new tool. The wild part to me is, so I said we're not going to use it at all. To go to that extreme seems an interesting choice. I would be curious to know, like, why she didn't opt, or maybe she did and it didn't work out for her. I would be curious to know why not scaffold the learning of the AI tool more, and what to do to audit the output of the AI tool, what to do to scaffold the input to the AI tool. That escalated quickly.
Well, and that's kind of where, like, when we work with teachers right now using AI tools, it's like, if you do not have a framework, the scaffold, the structures necessary to say this is a tool that you are going to use. You are not going to jump to the tool immediately, but the tool can be referred to, it can be conferred with, it can be conversed with in order to help you to a certain outcome. Great. But again, this is a conversation, a interview that has been condensed for reading, etc. And I'd love to actually speak to her in person and say, look, what's the actual demonstrate the actual structure to utilize in the classroom in order to get the kids to do.
I would love to know. I would love to actually be able to talk to her and find out, like, what more details. I want, like, I want the unabridged version of this paragraph. Like, I want to know all the details about what happened. And I think, going back to what I said at the top, I think her concerns are founded. Yes, this makes perfect sense. Your students didn't have the skills. I would argue too that this is like many things in our careers as teachers, where the teacher has to learn the technology alongside the students, because it comes out, like, it's not like the teacher gets to see it first and then can learn about it and teach the students. Like, it's, you learn about it alongside them. And I think that her frustration makes sense. Like, and she was doing the best she could with what she knew at the time, no doubt. We've learned a lot since then, a year ago. and I know that, like, for a lot of teachers, it may not be their default thinking mode to think through what a process looks like to engage with a tool like the LLMs, the AI tools, whatever you call it. That's what we're for. We're here to help with that. But oh my gosh, yes, I'd love to have a conversation with her about, like, I am dying to know what this experience was like that drove you so far in the opposite direction.
The structure is important, and just kind of as we go to the end of this particular situation, we have identified 4 co-intelligence phases with AI tools. And again, this is authentic to the intelligent hoodlums. This is not, oh, we sat and we originated. This is lots of different ideas coming and colliding in order to create a system that works in classrooms, works for students, works for teachers as well. So instructional design as well. And that's first leading with human intention. So when we say that, we're talking about, you have expertise. And I think this goes to what Ms. Bond was attempting to say throughout or was saying in the interview. Your people in the room have talents. They have authentic experiences that need to be recognized. How do you, before we start dealing with LLMs, with the Google tools, with this tool, this other tool, or whatever,
with any tool,
we say, what do you know? What do you need to know, and why do you need to know it? And really taking some time to be introspective as learners, as instructional designers, etc. But you as a human, not with any other influences. And also with other humans, perhaps, in your group, in your grade level, in your department, whatever it is. Then kind of taking a resource mapping approach, integrating available instruments. And that's all instruments. That's other humans that can help you with your particular problem. That's all the tools that come to bear, books you might have in your library, resources in your environment, all that kind of stuff. And really taking an opportunity to write those things down and map those things to how they might help you in the endeavor that it happens to be your problem. All right. And then taking that to your AI tool and saying, this is what I am as a human and what I've kind of reconciled or kind of thought about. Here's everything that I think can help me. And then going to the AI. Why don't you look here? You had something to say.
Oh, I was just going to say, this follows the diverge pattern. So there's I don't know if it's a software development thing. Anyway, it's the idea that you diverge, you basically spew out all your ideas and information without any filter. And then you do a second phase of converge where you're sorting through, okay, now that I have this big long list of things, let's sort out and figure out what's valuable to this particular experience. That helps minimize your cognitive load. So you're not trying to both generate the list, sort through it, and make decisions about it all at the same time. So this is very intentionally designed around minimizing that cognitive load so that the process is an easy one to go through.
Shout out to Miss Jackson again. This is the second time I mentioned her doing this particular show. Miss Jackson, when I was in 4th grade, we would do something called stream of consciousness. She would tell us, she would say, get your pencil. I do not want to see your pencil come up from that sheet of paper for the next 60 seconds.
We did that too.
And you would write down anything that came to your head. Da, 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 and that's how we got our generated our brainstorming for our papers, for whatever. It was just great concept. Once you've gone through leading with human intention and then integrating all your available instruments, it's now focused with AI and having that conversation. Here's what I know, the things that I know to be true. So now to what Ms. Bond mentions in the articles, like now I am able to speak from my level of authenticity, my level of expertise as I'm conversing with the AI tool. The AI tool is not feeding me anything. In this sense, we're conversing about and negotiating. This is what I need to do. This is how this is going to look. You know, I am the person that's in the pilot seat, not the person being taken for the ride. And that's, I think, also important as we start integrating not only with AI tools, but any tool, you know, or any environment as we're going through things. And then once we have that focus with AI, where we're, you know, gleaning our information from that conversation, it's always reflection. How are we then transforming from experimentation? We've played around with this thing. What things went very well, what things didn't go very well, what are things, ideas I need to make sure are in place for next time, guardrails, things that I might want to experiment the next time with. But if you do not have a structure for your learning environment for kids to actually go through the process, you are going to have issues with people saying, what you're talking about is not appealing to me. It's not engaging. Therefore, I will offload this to ChatGPT, Gemini, whatever you're talking about, because I don't want to deal with it. So there's also a very real conversation, Webs, that we have to have with ourselves as instructional designers. How well do you know your young people? How are you making your work high interest enough that this person, when given the chance, is not going to use ChatGPT to just do your information, your work? Mm-hmm. Because that is the other thing that's not been stated, I think, as authoritatively as, oh, the kids are using ChatGPT. Well, dude, I just walk in your classroom. I don't want to do that. So if there was a tool that would magically do that for me, guess what? I would also take that for 100. Alex, go ahead.
I think that needs to be the topic after this because, yeah, hard agree. Also, that Lift framework is available on our website if you want to download it for free. If you want to get it before the next episode and kind of mess around with it, in the next episode, we'll be going through and showing you how you can like Liftify an application or Liftify a lesson. So similar to our first episode where we went through and talked through how might we update a lesson. We're going to update another lesson. Oh, that's weird. Cloudflare. I also just wanted to share an example of how and evidence that we have designed the Lift framework, not from just random. We didn't just tap into ChatGPT like, hey, create a framework for us. Like, it's from actual experience. So over the summer, I took my dogs on a trip across the country, and both of my dogs are reactive. They had an incident back in January. So we had been working with a trainer through that, but I still wanted them to be safe sharing space in the car. So I wanted to design some sort of barrier where I knew that they could be kept separate while we were driving across the country. So I worked with Claude to figure out how I was going to design that barrier. And the first thing I did was I sat down and I said, okay, what am I trying to accomplish? And what does success look like? What tools do I have available? Sometimes I would add in like images of what the inside of my car looked like, or information about like what make model I have of my car, or different setups I already have with like what I call the dog taco, that little seat cover thing that in the back. Yeah, the dog taco. And so like it would give me a, hey, well, you could build it this way. And like one of the first things it suggested, and kind of what I had already thought about was, oh, I can build like a frame with PVC pipe and then make a divider. But then I started thinking about like, well, but if I do that and we're in a crash, that splinters, it's hard. What are some alternatives? So then I said, hey, what are some alternatives that might be a little more crash safe? We iterated back and forth. It probably took me 10 iterations. So so I planned things out. I figured out what my resources were. I engaged with Claude in this case. Then I experimented with what it gave me and tested, iterated, figured out where the problems are. I'd go back to it. There was like, we started out with PVC pipe. I did a cardboard version. At one point I was going to do like, there were a couple materials that suggested that I had never worked with before, like air. No, what do you call it? Stuff that relates to airplanes. It's called aviation wire.
Okay.
Which I had never heard of before, but like at one point I was going to try aviation wire, and then I decided not to do that. And then I was like, maybe it'll be all fabric. Maybe I'll attach it to the frame of the car. Maybe. So what I finally settled on, because we did make the trip, it was successful. It was great. I took a gym, like a tumbling mat that I got off of just Amazon. And I created a cover for the little center console in my back seat. It flips down. The cover was made out of cardboard as its skeleton, and then it was covered with Cordura, which is rip resistant. I watched a whole bunch of videos about how to build with cardboard. Do you know how many things you can build with cardboard? You can build like whole furniture with like layered cardboard. It's one of the strongest materials and it's biodegradable. You can glue it together using wheat paste. It's bananas. It is absolutely bananas.
Interesting.
Cardboard's amazing. Anyway, so I built out this whole thing, and then I had the gym mat was shaped like a little wedge. So I wedged it in between and then put like this wedge pillow I had in the middle, and that created this like soft, cushy divider for both of the dogs. I built out I attached Velcro to the top of the cover of the center console, and the mat had these Velcro flaps, so that held it in place. It was fantastic. So
interesting.
Yeah. And so that followed the lift framework. Like I would experiment and then I'd go back, I'd revise the needs that I had, have another conversation, come up with a new plan. And so it was very back and forth, but that is a skill like anything else. We've had the conversation about how we don't prepare kids for working in groups. We don't prepare kids for project management. These are all skills we just assume that they have, and they aren't. I think that AI also falls into that category. Is an explicit skill that needs to be taught how to interact with it, what scaffolds you need in order for them to be successful.
Absolutely. And it goes back to your literacy thing. AI literacy, digital literacy. Literacy is knowing how to do the thing the way that it was meant to be done is important. But also, again, as educators, one of the more difficult things is finding the time to upskill. And you've got it's a very stressful job. There's lots of things going around. But in the same way we wouldn't ban books, I think wholesale saying we won't use this thing in school, it's kind of getting the ick is on it, in my opinion. you know,
It just encourages them to go underground,
and
honestly.
yeah,
Like, that's what'll actually happen is you'll end up unintentionally punishing the most vulnerable students in your classroom, and they're just going to do it anyway. Like, at least give them the tools so that they know how to use it effectively and responsibly to build their skills.
absolutely. And a non-AI story as we close. Um, when I went to high school originally, DC Public Schools, Benjamin Banneker Academic High School. Shout out to the Bulldogs. Very tiny little spot in Washington D.C. Still, it's an IB school if I'm not mistaken now. But spent my freshman, my sophomore year there, and when I was there, I had a teacher named Mr. Jesse Nicholson, who was also my basketball coach there. Shout out to Nick. Um, and he would give me the freedom to write my essays with all kind of hip hop analogies and references. So I'd write things with Gangstar references and Nas, like all kind of stuff. It was so fun. Like he taught me social studies. It was world American history, and I would every essay I wrote it was from the perspective of this American history or event from the perspective of some kind of rap group or the Fugees or wherever it was, right? And it was cool. When I transferred schools to Prince George's County Schools, I went to Parkdale High School. Mr. Vogley, shout out to Vogues. Mr. Vogley is my guy. One of the reasons he's constantly a inspiration as I think about stuff. Mr. Nicholson, younger 20 in his 20s, really kind of younger, beginning his career. Mr. Vogley, savvy veteran of teaching for God knows how many years when I was in this course. I got my first assignment. This is European history, junior year of high school, and I attempt to write in the same way I was writing for Mr. Nicholson. Mr. Vogley says, absolutely not. It's not how we write academically. I want academic work. And so I went to him and said, what the devil does that mean? And he demonstrated to me what academic work, this is how things are structured, da da da. Cool, I know what you want, whatever. So Mr. Vogley, because of my performance in his course, is the one who recommended me to go to the IB course. End up transferring from the gifted and talented, whatever program it was, to IB, and doing that thing. And I always remember the fact that he took the time to demonstrate to me what he wanted. This is what it looks like. Ended up my senior year of high school, I wrote an essay about Mr. Vogley. I got a scholarship from McDonald's. He got an award from them as well because he was the teacher that was the inspiration behind that situation. I got like 2 shares of McDonald's stock as a part of that as well, which is hilarious. I have no idea what those 2 shares are at this point. They're probably not worth. I got to look up what McDonald's shares are at this particular point, but whatever. But if you want someone to demonstrate a behavior, you need to demonstrate how to get to that particular point to the person. And you have the patience requisite to say, you're not going to get this in the first try, generally. When we talk about AI, baseball, knitting, whatever, without the archetype that demonstrates to you, this is how you do this in a step-by-step logical process, it does not work. So, in episode 2 of the Bond Question, we're going to look at Hamlet, since that's an English English composition type situation, something a high schooler would have to do. Look at Hamlet. We're going to identify or look a little bit more at the interview with Bond, and then the second part is her response. So her response is she doubled down on me. I'm still not using it after school year, which is also that's kind of wild. But we'll look at that, and then we'll apply the left framework to thinking about how we can reimagine Hamlet